the procedures require a hearing, right?
The procedure is required back when the children are determined to be dependent.
So they didn't even need a hearing that day.
They don't need a hearing. They don't need notice. The juvenile court has the authority to act in the best interest of the children.
Based upon what, though? Because the juvenile court, in his infinite wisdom, can decide now this is in the best interest of the children, and I don't need to hear from the children or the parents or anybody else. As long as the government says it's okay, then by God, it's okay.
Yes, that's what the juvenile court has the authority to do, and your remedy at that point is to appeal. It doesn't make the order void.
So what happens during the appeal? You just don't have your kids. You have to wait 8 months for this court to rule?
Yes, and it's the juvenile
with no
court.
due process.
Well, you do have due process. You have the right to appeal.
Let me tell you what went on here. This is my guess from being on the bench a long time, down in the bar fights that are Superior Court. I'm telling you this. So you're telling me that DFACS can come to you, take your children, get you in front of the juvenile court judge, and says, "Listen, sign the consent order, and we'll let your children stay with you." And you say, "Whatever it takes, because I just want to go home with my babies. That's all I want to do." Kind of like the mama said here, "Please don't take the children." And they say, "Fine, just do it. You can DFACS, you stay at home with your children, keep rocking along, keep doing drugs. Just get off of them when you can." And then eventually, when you cross the DFACS, they go to the judge by themselves, and then they take your children. And that's constitutional in this country?
Yes, well, they had counsel.
I live in the wrong
They
country.
had at the time they stipulated to the dependency, they were represented.
If that's true, then the entire statutory regime in Georgia is unconstitutional.
Yeah, well,
I'm just telling you, because if that is honestly the state's position, then you're going to see something like the parole case. That's just unbelievable to me that that's the state's position.
yeah, that is in fact what the juvenile code provides.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Have any interactions with the bureaucracy. Okay, they're not interacting with you. They're actually interacting with your legal fiction, because they can't deal with a flesh and blood human. Yeah, they have to deal with another corporation.
When you start to break down the words that we use, and you start to look at the roots of all these words, and you actually look at where these words, what these words actually really mean, you start to get an idea of what's going on. The word corporation is very, very specific, because it's corp and oration, it's dead speak. So a corporation is something that's dead. It's an entity that exists only in a legal framework. It doesn't exist in any other framework at all. It only becomes an entity through legal mechanisms and legal means.
In essence, when you were born and far too young to understand, a company with your name was created through your birth certificate. When your parents registered your birth, they actually created a company and handed ownership of that company and you over to the state. It is important to remember that your parents were tricked and had no idea this was happening. This is why the state can take children from their families and it not be classed as kidnapping. They own your child.
They own 1/10. Because they registered the child, they have 9/10. Possession is 9/10 of the law. But there's 1/10 floating about somewhere. And the government have claimed that 1/10. So when the child, because I've had it from social workers, at least now, 3 social workers on separate occasions have come out of audiences and actually said to me, you're right in what you're saying, is because we have to get the birth certificate within 48 hours of taking the child. And if they can't get the birth certificate, they have to reapply to be able to get the birth certificate. They have to get it, because that is proof of who the slave is, what the slave is. And actually, in legal terms, they're actually only entitled to the birth certificate and not the child. To take the child on the pretense that they are this legal personality is theft. So in legal terms, it's kidnapping. But the social services can use legal kidnapping, because everything is okay as long as it has the stamp legal applied to it. That includes war, genocide, anything is okay as long as it's okay, it's legal.
First, it's helpful to note that the United States government is not actually a government like most assume it to be. The United States is a company, a corporation. United States of America Incorporated is a legal fiction operating in commerce and bankruptcy for profit under limited liability insurance. It is a business. U.S. citizens are employees of the corporation and subject to the bylaws of the corporation known as United States statutes, acts, codes, rules, and regulations. Continuing on with the why. The why did they induce you to become a trust? It's because the United States is bankrupt. In order to borrow money through loans from international bankers, and I'll interject right here because why would they need to get loans from international bankers? Well, the reality is that we are the creditors, we're the controllers of the public trust, but we haven't been acting that way. The majority of folks in America don't even know about this, let alone are they acting like the creditors that they are. We're not funding the public as we could be. So they got to go get money from somewhere else. They have to go seek out some other creditors who will extend them credit because the people of the nation aren't doing it. We could be. So anyway, that's why in order to borrow money through loans from international bankers, United States of America Incorporated had to put up collateral. Sureties had to be put in place to secure payment to the creditors of the bankruptcy. After all the land of America was pledged as surety, the only thing left for the bankrupt United States to pledge was its citizens. This is not the first bankruptcy. I'm referring to the early 1930s, where there was a bankruptcy, but that's not the first one. So by the time that bankruptcy took place, the only thing left to pledge was the people on the land. Their property, including their own bodies and their lifespan's worth of commercial energy, is pledged as surety for the national debt.
Now, it starts with the birthing certificate. That's sort of where it all really begins. So when you get to 18 or whatever and you want to go and get a bank account and a driver license or anything, but usually it's a bank account. They say, well, you'll have to go and apply for a license. You'll have to go and apply for a birthing certificate, birth certificate. So you say, yeah, okay, I'll go and do that. So you walk into the courthouse, which is really, these days, before we go on with this story, birthing certificates are now housed in Australia in the CBA building at 180 Ann Street. The CBA building is the Commonwealth Bank of Australia building. All the birthing certificates were taken out of the government printing office at 110 George Street, which sure is already one evil-looking building, as you can see here. The satanic symbols on this building are telling you something. But as you can see with the new building, it also houses a modern form of satanic symbolism. That's the snake or the vine that is on the building. And that comes from the old Roman god of Libor, which is the Roman god of wine, and the vineyards, which is the vines that creep through everything and attach themselves. A vine can't stand on its own legs. It has to be supported by something else. So back to our story. You walk into the court. Say, sir, you walk into the courthouse at the counter downstairs, wherever it is, and so I'd like to apply for a birth certificate. And I said, yes, by all means. We're going to need your name and your date of birth. And this is where it all starts. I say, what's your name? And you'll say, my name is John Henry Doe, which is really a Christian name and your surname attached as one name. That's what you will say. So they say, yes, no worries. Then you will say, they will ask you for your date of birth. So you will make another error and you will say, my date of birth is the date I was born. They say, yes, not a problem. So when you give the full name that included your surname or your last name, and you gave the date of birth that included your date of born, they give you this document here, which is called the State Birth Certificate. And you will walk out with that, and you'll take that around to the bank and say, look, got my certificate. And they will know exactly what to do with that certificate. Because the information on this certificate gets this certificate. Now, when I went in and applied for my birth certificate, I did the same thing. I walked in happy as ever. Hello, how are you? To the girls at the court. And they said, yes, what can we do for you? I said, I would like to apply for a birth certificate. And they said, well, we're going to need your name and your date of birth. And I said, yeah, no worries. So they said, well, what's your name? And I gave my name that is on the birth certificate, the state birth certificate. It says here, in this case, this is William Vaughan Izard, if he gave his full name. But on the birth certificate, and on yours, and on everybody's birth certificate, the only name that exists on this is William Vaughan, which is John Henry, the Christian name only. It is no surname attached to that name there. The surname is attached to your father and your mother. They have surnames, but you don't. So remember that. This is the evidence that your name is only, in this case, William Vaughan. In my case, Romilly Stewart. In the general trend, John Henry, not Doe. The John Henry name is there. So that's something that you've got to think about when you give your full name. Because if you give your full name as John Henry Doe, they will give you this. So I gave my full name. Would you like my full name? And they said, yeah. I said, yes. They said, yes, we want your full name. I said, my full name is exactly what's on the birth certificate here. Romilly Stewart. I did not enter the John Henry Doe. I just entered the John Henry. So they didn't do anything. They just did. Have you got a date of birth? Now, it's very interesting because the word date is the key to this scam. Because the birth is the creation of an office, the birth of an office, or the birthing of a ship, the birthing of a corporate entity, the birthing of a corporation, an entity of some kind, an organisation. The date that is birthed, the date of registration of that, is the date of birth. So the word date refers to the date of the acknowledgement of the deed, and not the day the thing itself was created. So where you would have given your full name as John Henry Doe and your date of birth as the date you were born, I gave the Christian name and the date that it was registered up here. See that? That's the date of registration. That's the date that this certificate was stamped and entered into the court. On the certificate of birth, it has this information because it has in this box up the top here, name, which is the full name of the child, which is William Vaughan, the date he was born, on the 22nd of April in 1953. But down here, it says the date of registration, which in this case, it was 8th of May, 1953. So it was around a month after, a little over 1 month after, where this certificate, in his case, they created the proper certificate of birth. So on your birth certificate, your state birth certificate, it provides the information of your name, which is your full name, which is only your Christian name. It provides the date you were born, but it also provides the date of registration. the date of registration is the date of birth. Now remember, I'm the tin foil hat. I was the crazy one. I was the crazy one. Yet, legally and lawfully, all this information is here in full disclosure. They haven't hidden it. They haven't hidden anything. So, back to the court, I gave the date of birth as the registration date. They said, yep, no worries. Just got on the phone. We'll just ring the births, deaths and marriages, which instead of being at 110 George Street, it has changed to 180 Ann Street, Brisbane City. In the city, not Brisbane, but Brisbane City. And after about 7 seconds, she said, yes, sir, we have found your birth certificate. I said, oh, thank you very much. I said, would you like us to send it to you, to your ad address? I said, no. I said, you send it to the court. And I want nothing written on the back as stamped to who the Mr. is, to Mr. Doe. I just want you to send the certificate. So they called the Registrar General, David John. He should still be there as the Registrar General. He still is at 2018. And he got on the phone and he said, what would you like? And I said, I'd like you to send the birth certificate to the court and I will collect it over the counter. He said, yeah, that sounds fine. Gave it back to the girls. I said, yep, no worries. So after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, the girls rang me up from the court and said, your birth certificate has arrived at the court. I said, thank you very much. I'll come in and get it. So that afternoon, I came into the court, walked into the court, and they had it still enclosed inside an envelope, a ledger. The envelope with the window on it, you know, the ones you get the bills in the mail. And I said, and it was addressed to the court. I said, I can't open this. This is addressed to the court. I would be violating Section 85Q and 85N, I think it is, of the Crimes Act 1914, which is a 10-year imprisonment for interfering with another person's mail. So I said, this is addressed to you. You can only open this. I can't do that. So they said, oh, okay, well, do you mind if we open it? I said, no, you open it. So they opened it. And then they pulled out, not this, they pulled out that. And even the girls at the court said to me, what's that? I said, that's a birth certificate. That's the certificate of birth that you get when you know your name and your date of birth. If you don't know your name and your date of birth, they will make you up a birth certificate and treat you as a debtor of their estate. But when you apply for this one, you become the creditor of their bank, their state. I mean, it used to be the government, but because Australia doesn't have a government anywhere, the banking system has taken over. The Rothschilds owns the US Federal Reserve and the Australian Federal Reserve, Federal Reserve of Australia. That one bank owns all of them. So that one bank has now become the government of all of the registered companies registered with the US SEC, which would even include like Britain as well. Australia, New Zealand, probably even the United States. They've all been put as companies with the United States Federal Reserve Bank. And that is so that the whole world can use that currency of that bank. That's like on the internet. I mean, it's got its good points because you can now world trade with a currency, even though that the Australian currency and the US dollar and the euro, they're different currencies or have different values, but they all interlock in through the United States Federal Reserve Bank. That's where they're eventually going to try and bring in a one world currency. But that currency, in the Australian Constitution, it says that only the government has the right to coin the money. But this money has been coined or created by the US Federal Reserve, which is a foreign deity, a foreign account, a foreign nation. But by joining that nation, that's getting into an act of treason or treachery against their own nation. But we didn't know that because they called the Queensland Queensland government, or the Queensland government, or the state of Queensland, when they registered that corporate name, State of Queensland, and Queensland Treasury Corporation, and in Australia's case, the Commonwealth of Australia, when they registered that name as a company name with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, that did not mean Commonwealth of Australia. And because they wrote that text in an all uppercase hieroglyphic illustrative text, which is pictures and patterns, it is not a descriptive text. It's not proper English. It's not the common language. It's a foreign language. Because they wrote the Commonwealth of Australia in a foreign language, it did not read the Commonwealth of Australia. Something else changed in 1966 as well. And what happened was our schools removed grammar and Latin from the schools in 1966. So prior to that, at school we learned grammar and Latin. And Latin were the roots of the English language, or many of the roots of the English language. So and my father used to call Latin the math of English. And when in 1966, when the school got rid of Latin and grammar out of their curriculum, my father bitterly complained to the school and said that the students will become illiterate. They won't know how to read if you take those things out of the curriculum. Well, I'm going to show you exactly what's happened. It's strange that this happened in 1966 too, when the pound went to the dollar, and grammar and Latin were removed from the schools. So it's funny that is. But I'm going to just show you.
Okay, so 1500. So it says in modern times. Well, in 1856, modern times would be around the 1800s, wouldn't it? In modern time, so surname in modern times have become family names. Okay, and if you want to also get into why they're over and above and have authority over the Christian name, it also says here they are called surnames because originally they were written over the name in judicial writings and contracts. So they were written over the top of the Christian name in judicial writings and contracts. That's why they're called surnames, because they're over and above the Christian name, and have taken authority over it.